This year's US Open came right down to the wire, as golf's top stars like Rory McIlroy and Jon Rahm battled to claim the top spot, while Australia's hope Cameron Smith struggled and missed the cut. However, the overarching story of the weekend wasn't from the course itself, as LIV golf clouds loomed over the whole competition. So from Smith losing his cool to the Saudi League dominating conversations, here's everything that went down. First up, Morikawa talks about his game before the final day. At the end of day 3 at the 2022 US Open, it was honestly anyone's trophy, and previous year's winner Jon Rahm and the golfing prodigy Rory McIlroy shared the lead with world number 7 Colin Morikawa, who himself fired a 4-under par 66 to move to the final day showdown. Of course, at that point, everyone's got some nerves because you've made it through 3 full days of golf in the lead. But it's the 4th day that really matters at the end of the day, since we've seen so many golfers fumble the bag from a commanding lead over and over again. At the same time, though, we've also seen people close down a 7-point deficit to win major titles. So it's anyone's game, really. According to Morikawa, however, he'd been confident all weekend long, so it wasn't a surprise for him to make it into the final cut. Plus, he came into this on the back of last year's British Open and the 2020 PGA Championship, both of which were incredible achievements just at the age of 25. Morikawa wasn't going to let anything distract him from the prize, though, and speaking at the end of the 3rd day, he made it clear that he's just going to stick to his game plan and try not to run out of steam over the next 36. But as they say, hindsight is 2020. So we now know how the plan went, as the world number 7 failed to capitalize on his earlier lead and ended up with a bunch of birdies to finish at 2 under par, some 4 points behind the actual runaway winner, Matt Fitzpatrick. Up next, the Australian contingent struggles to make it through. Now, while the Americans continued to make the cut through to the final day, the same couldn't have been said for the Aussie stars. Not only were they pretty horrendous throughout the tournament, but things went especially bad for them on day 3, as most of them dipped out. Of course, people might say that Lady Luck just wasn't on their side, but perhaps there's a fundamental problem that we're missing here. Take Cameron Smith, for example. He started the day at 2 over, which was still a recoverable position. However, the world number 6 then went on to play a round of 74 featuring 5 bogeys on Saturday, missing the chance to actually compete on the final day. And what's more, in a fit of rage and frustration, he even managed to break his club during the 15th hole, which kinda summed up the whole situation, honestly. Obviously, not all the Aussies missed the cut, as Mark Leishman, Adam Scott, Todd Sinnott, and Min Woo Lee did manage to make their way through to Sunday with scores ranging between +1 and 3. But still, no one was expecting a player of Smith's caliber to bow out so soon. Thankfully, he had some shoulders to lean on, as his fellow Australians Lucas Herbert and Jed Morgan also failed to make the cut with some frankly horrendous scores. But all eyes were on golf villain Mickelson, who also missed the cut. Alright, we can't just skirt around the fact that the US Open also featured 15 of the quote-unquote golf rebels, who already been suspended by the PGA Tour, and among them, Phil Mickelson was perhaps the one everyone focused on the most, as the past few months have been nothing but controversy for him. Like, even after Brooks Koepka's signing, Mickelson continues to be the poster boy for Greg Norman's breakaway tour, so it felt kinda weird seeing him compete against other stars like Rory McIlroy, who, of course, is super against the whole idea of LIV golf. With that said, it seems like karmic energy was against the 53-year-old on the day, as he missed the cut on 11 over 151 on Saturday. Also, funnily enough, one of his tee shots also bonked a fan right on the head, which, according to some, was a metaphor for how he's betrayed his supporters. Plus, after his dreadful day, Mickelson refused to talk to the reporters and instead released a statement via the UCGA. What's even more fascinating, however, was the fact that LIV players were a combined 53 over on Thursday and 25 over on Friday, which frankly isn't a great record. At the same time, though, many people were confused about why they were allowed to compete in the first place. After all, hadn't they been just barred by the PGA Tour? Next up, LIV golf stars attract unwanted attention at US Open. Now, before the US Open, everyone's attention was on LIV Golf's first Invitational in London, and even though that event had finished weeks before we actually got to the country club, the shadow of the Rebel League was still looming over everyone. Like, literally, no one was safe from the bombardment of questions from curious journalists about how the US Open management was going to treat the PGA defectors. Oh, and then there was a swath of people who just didn't understand how Mickelson's contingent was even competing there. Just in case you're one of them, though, here's a simple rundown. You see, the US Open isn't actually managed by the PGA. Instead, the USGA, which is the United States Golf Association, is the organization that manages it. So any decision made by the tour isn't actually binding on this tournament's management. Of course, that doesn't mean that the PGA Tour doesn't have any influence over the UCGA's decision. Actually, far from it. Like, we've already seen other tours like the DP World Tour impose bans and fines on their players for taking part in the LIV Golf Tour. So honestly, it was probably a matter of timing rather than anything else, since the US Open arrived so soon after the Invitational. Now, things might be different next year. Obviously, there was no way that journalists would have let the US Open management off the hook without explaining their decision to keep LIV golf competitors. So after dodging the question earlier, the UCGA chief Mike Wan finally had to come clean and tell everyone why he chose to not follow the PGA Tour suspension. suspension. And according to him, there were some pretty lengthy discussions about what to do with all these golf rebels. However, the final decision came down to the fact that it would have been a slippery slope to ban a player just because he'd been competing somewhere else. Like at that point, you're looking at thousands of players and checking their history and track record, which is kind of an impossible job in and on itself. On top of that, it's not like the PGA Tour players are fully clean, as they've obviously been competing in events around the world too, including China and the Middle East. So discriminating against only the LIV Golf Tour players just didn't seem fair. With that said, Wan did say that things could change very quickly, and as early as next year, there's a pretty good chance that the Saudi League players would find it much harder to gain entry into the US Open. But the PGA chief ended his statement by saying that it's too hard to predict what's going to happen since the LIV Golf Tour itself continues to evolve and change into a different entity every other month. So no one really knows how big its influence will be come 2023. And finally, stars aligned for LIV Golf to live on and compete. Now, it's easy to think that the LIV Golf Tour would have already crumbled apart by the time we get to the next year's US Open. After all, things have been kinda rough ever since the PGA Tour suspension. Having said that, the funding level of the Saudi-funded league is just too vast for it to fall without putting up a fight. Like, we're talking billions of dollars here. Plus, despite the ban, we're still seeing some of the top PGA Tour talent defecting and making their way to compete in the Upstart Tour. For instance, just this month alone, we've seen Brooks Koepka sign a $200 million deal with Greg Norman. Plus, this is after his long rant at the US Open about how he doesn't like the fact that LIV Golf is taking away all the attention these days. So if someone like that could be convinced to join, then we're sure others will follow too. Oh, and let's not forget, the Australian Kingpin is also trying to get official World Golfing Rankings recognition, which would legitimize his league even more. In fact, if the Breakaway Tour does manage to give its players the incentive to rise up in the world of golfing ranks, then we really don't see how the US Open's leadership will resist the urge to include them in the mix for next year. That's a wrap for this video. Do you think that players like Koepka and Mickelson would compete in the 2023 US Open? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.